All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third Diversity and Inclusion event, Starting Early to Change the Face of Wall Street. My name is Leslie Theodosopoulos. I'll be monitoring today's session, and I wanted to introduce myself and give you all a little bit of background around why this topic is so important to the Society of Philadelphia before I introduce our very esteemed guest. So, my name is Leslie. I work at Vanguard in financial technology, and I'm also on the board of directors for the CFA Society of Philadelphia. As part of the board, I lead an initiative called Invest in Her Future. And this is a great initiative that the Society launched about 5 years ago, where we focus on working with local university students, particularly females, to increase the pipeline of females into the finance industry. So we bring professionals in front of these students to myth bust and put success stories in front of these female students to really open their eyes to career opportunities and either get them interested or keep them very engaged in finance as a major. So as you can imagine, I'm very passionate about this topic and thrilled to introduce to you Mara Cunningham, who is the founder and CEO of Rock the Street Wall Street, whose mission is very, very closely aligned. Now, Mara launched Rock the Street in 2013 with a focus on improving financial literacy amongst grade school students. So a little bit earlier on in the pipeline, which is phenomenal. And opening their eyes to career opportunities in finance to get them interested in that earlier age. Prior to starting up Rock the Street, Mara spent 25 years in the finance industry doing an array of different things, including capital markets, mortgage-backed securities, real estate, and financial planning. So we are thrilled to have you, Mara, and I wanted to send a warm welcome on behalf of the Society. Thank you for joining.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, Leslie. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, and so what we thought we would do is we would start off with a short video that really speaks to Rock the Street's mission and how they're getting more and more involved with local societies across the nation to make their impact. So I believe, George, you will be playing the video for us.
Whenever I mention Rock the Street Wall Street, our monthly meetings, the enthusiasm with women for this initiative is greater than anything we have elsewhere. And we do have an issue within the CFA Society where folks are members of the society for a few years and they drop off because they don't have the enthusiasm or they're not getting the utility that they want. Now that we have Rock the Street Wall Street as a top initiative for us, we're seeing that a lot of women are trying to get more involved. And I think that by them getting involved, it's more likely that they'll remain within the CFA Society for years to come.
I heard about Rock the Street Wall Street from a colleague of mine in the CFA Society of New York, and as soon as I learned what the mission was, what the program entailed, I was hand up, ready to volunteer, be a part of the group, and see what we could do to bring more women in the CFA Society to be a part of Rock the Street Wall Street.
I do think it's aligned with the CFA Institute's mandate to encourage more women to pursue the charter, because if we're not getting women to start in financial services, then they never become interested in the CFA charter.
During the monthly meeting, we always discuss Rock the Street Wall Street as our top initiative. And after every meeting, I always have 5 or 6 women that are looking to volunteer come up to me and say, how could I get involved? I think they do see a lot of issues with the gender diversity gap, and now that they have this outlet to help out, they always jump on it.
I've always worked in roles where I've had mostly male bosses or mostly male teammates, and while I've always had a positive experience, I know that there are more women that we could bring into finance roles, especially those on more the investment side. There's more that we can do to bring women into those types of roles and into leadership roles. So what's been really great about being part of Rock the Street Wall Street is getting to speak with young women who are still figuring out what type of career path they want to pursue, and there is so much impact that can be made just by being there and exposing them, by having mentors who are working in finance now, bringing them into a financial firm for their field trip, giving them that experience early on versus waiting until it's too late.
So the biggest takeaway is how impressed I am with the questions that a lot of the young women are asking. to the mentors or the panelists, it blows me away. When I was in high school, I didn't know almost anything about finance, and they're asking about currency conversions, euros, and just thinking in a different way. And I think that's going to be great in the future. Now that they have the confidence and the knowledge now, that they'll be more likely to get involved later on.
So I think the students that go through Rock the Street Wall Street are learning about careers at a time when they're making those decisions on what college to attend and what degree to earn. Financial topics are not required in high school, and so I think it's very important. I personally did not know much about banking and finance when I was in high school. It wasn't until well into college that I decided on a finance degree. And starting early is important because we do know that student loan decisions are made and credit cards are often opened in high school, and so that's the time to start.
It is so important that high school girls are learning budgeting, saving, and investing, because the earlier they're equipped with this information, the better they can do once they are in college and have graduated college and are on their own. The gender investing gap is a huge problem nowadays, so the earlier that we can equip them with that knowledge and that they can grasp the concepts of the difference between saving and investing, how they can manage their money versus males, that's super important.
If a society is interested, or a member of a society is interested in sponsoring a Rock the Street Wall Street classroom, you should first go to your board members and propose it as an idea, because once your board needs to approve the funding that is required to sponsor a classroom, once that's done, then you're just going to need volunteers, women in your society, who can help run the classroom. The program is turnkey. The staff at Rock the Street Wall Street provide you with all of the resources that you could possibly need to put this program on. The curriculum is very well thought out, and there are multiple types of curriculum so that you can continue in the same school for multiple years. And so as a volunteer, that component has made it very easy for us to quickly step into a classroom and provide this education.
Rock the Street Wall Street definitely aligns with what I feel passionately about, being a woman in finance. I see the gap as far as women being represented at the senior ranks and even at more junior ranks. So it's important that we are working with girls as young as high school to bring them in so that we do have more of a balance going forward. And certainly as I look to continue my career and become a leader, I would love to see more women involved at the top.
We have had a wonderful time sponsoring a classroom this year of Rock the Street Wall Street with CFA Society of Louisiana. I envision that the board will want to continue in future years with other classrooms, and we're also reaching out to other members in our community to see if they might also be interested in sponsoring a classroom in New Orleans.
Right now we have one school that we are working together on, but I hope that we can kind of make that into a 3, 4, 5 school program where we can get a lot more women together, and hopefully they can go to college, be interested in finance, and then eventually want to get involved with the CFA Society, take the exams, and become leaders within the finance community.
You know, Rock the Street Wall Street!
Okay, and we're back. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with the CFA Society of Denver. I'm so sorry, Philadelphia, excuse me. Denver's on my mind because we are partnering with them this year too. So I might as well just get to the CFA societies that we are working with. Obviously, the CFA Society of New York City, 2 of whom you saw on the tape. This year we're including the CFA Society of Denver, which, as I understand, has the most number of females on its board. So they wanted to make sure that I knew that. So I'm letting you know too. So I thought what we would do is just, I would give a little overview as to why I launched Rock the Street Wall Street, but I'm sure you all know why. and just share with you our vision, our mission, and where we hope to go. That sound good, Leslie?
Yeah,
And
that's great.
at any time, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. And Leslie, please stop me at any moment, because I think you have more controls where you are versus where I am. And so let me just start off again with I'm Maura Cunningham. I'm the founder and CEO of Rock the Street Wall Street. I was in the profession for over 25 years, as Leslie mentioned. I worked on Wall Street for a number of years. I love the profession. I thought I had a lot of opportunities. I had to find those opportunities, and I did find them. I was fortunate enough to retire in 2009, and then I started to trade my own account. I still trade options, but after doing 3 years of just that, I thought that had to be more to life than this. So I went back to school and got my degree in civic leadership, thinking I would get into public policy about girls in math. And lo and behold, after the research, there really isn't any public policy on girls in math. And so I decided to launch a nonprofit instead. So when I launched in 2013, I was really quite concerned with how this would resonate with the women, because there were so few of us. Certainly in my office, I was always the only producing female, as I would say. And so when I launched it, I was just really, really astounded by the reception we had. And I'm happy to tell you more about that. But I will say this. When we asked for volunteers at one particular firm down in Texas, we only, at the time, needed 4 volunteers for our classroom situation. And when the 17th volunteer showed up, or rather signed up, I went back to our contact at that firm and I said, I don't know where I'm going to go with all these volunteers. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to extend this to a year-long program. So let me tell you about the program. So the program itself, we are a full academic year-long program. There are 3 components to the program. And so we have 2 in the fall, 1 in the spring. That's pre-COVID, and I'll talk about post-COVID if you'd like. But we're still 2 in this, we're 1 now in the fall and 2 hopefully in the spring. But there are 3 components. The first is a series of workshops that are held at the high school, which, by the way, in Philadelphia, we are at Carver High School. For those of you who know Carver High School, and BlackRock is our sponsor there. And we've been working with BlackRock in other ways too. They've actually offered our students internships during the summer. So that's high school internships, not college internships. And so they have offered 2 of our students up there this past year, with COVID, a summer internship, which was all virtual. Normally it's, of course, at the headquarters there in New York. So the 3 components. The first, again, is a series of classroom sessions. It's 5 sessions that are held at a local high school. We have the CFA societies going into the local high school. It's really interesting subjects in the sense that we have 3 different sets of curriculum. We have green, silver, and gold. So that some of the girls are with us actually for 2 years and some are actually with us for 3 years. Not that they have to be, they're interdependent, so that they don't have to be with, they don't have to do the green in order to do the silver. They can just do the silver, or they can do the gold, or whatever they want to do. So we are, this year, we are now in 18 cities across the United States and 30 different high schools, which is wonderful, particularly given the fact that we had a pandemic underway. We grew into 4 new cities and 9 new schools, high schools. So what we are, Rock the Street Wall Street is a financial and investment literacy program designed to spark the interest of high school girls into careers of finance. So we have 2 missions. One is financial and investment literacy, and then also to build a talent pipeline into the financial services profession. When I mentioned I got my master's degree in civic leadership, my thesis was on girls in math and how we lose them at age 9 in the United States and how that's uniquely an American problem and Western European problem. We do not have that problem in China, Russia, nor Eastern European countries, funnily enough. So it's not a, it is a cultural issue, not a capability issue. So we are appealing to the industry that if you really want to get more women into the profession, you must start earlier. So finally, we're getting some traction with our sponsors and with both the Wall Street community and the Silicon Valley community, by the way, in understanding it's just like programming. You have to catch them early. You can't wait until they get to college, because by the time they get to college, they've already opted out of math. And we have a great videotape about this on our website under the outcomes tab. If you go to our website, you'll see one of our professors talking about she normally has just 1 in 10 in her finance classes and has for over 30 years. So, so that's the first component. The second component is a field trip, and it's an extended lunch and learn, and it's a 3-hour trip. And the reason why we do a field trip is because the number one reason why girls are not choosing STEM professions, according to the research, is they don't see women in those professions in popular culture. The second reason that they're not choosing STEM professions is because they don't see their girlfriends choosing those majors and minors. So we overcome both of those by bringing in the volunteers and also by them seeing women in authority on the day of the field trip. It's critical that it's all women. And so we overcome that number one obstacle, which is they don't see women in those professions, because 100% of our volunteers are female financial professionals. We do not bring in a drama teacher, nor do we bring in the football coach, with all due respect to each of those. And my husband is an educator, so I'm very respectful, and I have many educators in my family. It's not meant to be disrespectful, but the reality is when I was doing an audit of who's giving the financial literacy classes in schools, it is the football coach or the drama teacher or a substitute teacher who have little to no financial experience. And also, by the way, over 80% of the teachers self-report, I'm going to repeat that, 80% self-report that they don't feel competent to teach financial literacy. So I'll let that sink in for a minute. I mean, just imagine if you had 80% of the history teachers or your English teachers reporting that. In my mind's eye, that's criminal, particularly since, as we all know, we all have to know finance in our everyday lives. It's absolutely criminal. So I'm absolutely thrilled with the response we've had with female financial professionals who have stepped up to volunteer with us. So I've gone over the first two components of the program. Over the holidays, we take a break, as do the schools, and they have exams. And so then we have our third component in the spring, which really starts in January. And that third component is a mentoring and protege sessions. And that is once a month that we get together with the girls, the volunteers get together with the girls, eyeball to eyeball. Although this year and last year it was a hybrid of both eyeball to eyeball, and then in March we became virtual. And that's really, really important to these girls. I will say this, 69% of our students are from minority populations, 44% are from low-income families. They've never seen, number one, a woman in authority, number two, a woman who's in a profession. And so it's critical that they see these women because they've never seen anything like it. Also, so we are providing what's called social capital to these girls. They have connections into the industry that they never would have had otherwise. We have had girls tell us that it's, changed their lives. We have gone to schools where we are working with the children of undocumented migrant workers. And the children of undocumented migrant workers, high school age. And the sponsor of that particular program down in the Fort Worth area, the very, very first question they asked those girls was, how many of you translate from English to Spanish for your parents? Well, of course, every hand went up, okay? And so the sponsor, to their credit, said, we want you. So just imagine the power of those girls hearing for the first time probably ever that somebody wanted them here in the United States, and wanted them because they had South American offices and they had many, many, South American clients. And this is a global firm, by the way. You all know this firm. I won't say who it is, but it's a global firm. And it was really, really moving. And the girls were just flabbergasted because in addition to that, the people who were being put in front of the students spoke Spanglish, which of course, again, they were just absolutely stunned at seeing that. So it was an incredibly moving experience for everyone, not only the students, but also for the volunteers. So that gives you an idea of the impact of the mentoring. Also, with regard to the mentoring sessions, the average ratio in public schools, because most of our corporations or corporate sponsors do want to go into public schools rather than private schools, although we're agnostic as far as where we go, and I'll talk about that more if anyone wants to know more. But the current ratio of student to guidance counselor is over 250 students to one guidance counselor per school. In the state of California, that's over 500 students to one. Okay, our students are 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. So we are an incredible added benefit to these high schools in that we do resume building with the students, we do mock interviews with the students, we give them, as I said earlier, the social capital of if they want to come into the profession, that you can provide them with access to potential internships and so forth. And this week, we put out a press release, I believe it was yesterday, that we announced how many schools we're in this year and how many cities and so forth and so on. But we also just released a new job portal. So if you go to our website, because our girls are now post-college, some of them, we're getting more and more inquiries from our sponsors about seeing the resumes of our students and also wanting to post jobs on our website. So we just unveiled that yesterday, so bear with us because it's new. And so we have about 4 or 5 live job postings in there. One is an internship, and I think 3 are, one is in Omaha, one is in St. Louis, and one is in Fort Worth, Texas. And then Brown Brothers Harriman is up there as well. And we also have TV Ameritrade up there, and we will be having more, such as JP Morgan, so forth and so on. It's the full cycle. So we take the girls from high school all the way to internships and then potentially a job. So that's the program. And I'm happy to share more with you, but at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Leslie, and it's all yours, Les.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was so helpful to hear about the program. It's so powerful that you're starting off with core foundational elements to increase literacy in not only finance, but investments. Then you're bringing them to local organizations to show them what careers look like and put them in front of professionals. And then lastly, the social capital piece and connecting them to others. Really, really powerful. And I understand why obviously you're doing that, and it feels like you're having a great impact. So I was curious, when you think ahead to the next 2 to 3 years, what does success look like for you for Rock the Street? Are there any goals or outcomes that you're tracking to and that you're trying to pull your organization towards as you look to expand your reach?
Sure, we do, of course. So we're currently, as I mentioned, in 18 cities, but we have interest coming in from over 67 cities across the United States. So we would love to get to all 67 cities. And so these are just cities where we have a financial professional asking to bring the program to that city. So there are more inquiries that are coming in, but they're mostly from parents where we don't have a financial entity involved yet. Not that we have financial entities involved in 67 yet either, but at least we have somebody who can rally the flag for us in that city. We just need the funding. So obviously the demand is there. As I mentioned, we've been speaking to Silicon Valley lately and through one of our board members. And so it's fascinating to see the difference between Silicon Valley versus Wall Street, I must say. And they want to see the up and to the right charts, of growth. And so we have a lot of up and to the right charts. We have growth in number of students, growth in number of cities, growth in our financial literacy rates, and growth in the number of girls who are inclined to major or minor in finance, economics, or a related computational field, which I suppose I should mention that right now. So we are metric people. We love numbers, of course. So and what gets measured gets done. So we're constantly measuring our results and constantly taking a pulse on our programming. So we measure our success in two ways because we have two missions, one being financial and investment literacy, and the second being the pipeline, the talent pipeline. So over the last 3 years, we have a running average increase of financial and investment literacy rates of over 93%. And we measure that by taking a pre-test of the girls the day we meet them and then a post-test the day we leave them. And that increases, as I said, is 93% increase. Wow. And then we also ask the girls, we take the day we meet them, are you likely to major in finance, economics, or a related computational field? In other words, not marketing and not HR. And our girls are indicating that they are 4.8 times more likely than your average female attending university to major in those disciplines, again, economics, finance, or related computational business field. So we're really proud of those numbers, and those are two things. So we would love to see, obviously more of that. We would love to see us get into those 67 cities. We would love to see the girls being hired by some of our sponsors and even outside of our sponsorship family. And then also with the CFA Society in particular, we would love to grow our relationships with them. We are in touch with a number of them around the country. We would love to see them step up to either sponsor or co-sponsor a chapter. So in New York City, for instance, we have a co-sponsoring situation going on. So in New York City, they have what's called the Young Leaders Club. I believe it was originally started in Boston and then it came to New York. They have a lot of youth there. It's a very active community. And so it was them, that group particularly, that pushed forward with sponsoring our program. And you saw them on the tape, Bron Cavagnaro and Caroline Busby. And they are co-sponsoring that the CFA Society of New York City is co-sponsoring the Clinton High School with 100 Women in Finance. So for those of you who are both a member of a CFA Society and 100 Women in Finance, 100 Women in Finance is looking to get more involved with us in other cities. And I know they have their big chapters. And so we're talking to them about, Chicago next year and some other cities. And of course, 100 Women in Finance is also global. So we would love to see, we have become a little more familiar with the funding that's available via the Institute versus the individual societies. And so we can help you bolt together a sponsorship. And so it works really well when we can introduce you to a co-sponsor.
Oh, that's great. I mean, amazing to hear about the growth and interest in the cities that you're working in. And then the numbers alone, 93% increase in financial literacy and close to 5 times more likely for these students to be interested in a finance type major. Like, that's incredible. Kudos to you and your organization for making that change and that impact. I wanted to shift focus and talk a little bit more about what the experience is like for the girls in the classroom. Are there elements of that 3-part curriculum that they enjoy more than others? How do the girls respond to the program overall, so we can get a little bit more sense of what the girls are going through?
I would say the number one favorite thing is the field trip, for sure. And I will say that the reason for that is because they have context. Because when we initially started 7 years ago, we used to just take them on a field trip with no context, really, thinking that they would absorb it. And that really wasn't happening well. But when we tweaked it so that we would have the 5 weeks of programming before the field trip, and then they got to the field trip, there was a lot more engagement. There was a lot more of the questions that were asked. Actually, some of them coming forward and saying, can I get an internship here? And because we were working, we'd already talked about their resumes and things like that. I would have to say it's the field trip that's really eye-popping for them. I mean, think about it. Try to think back when you were a high school kid. I mean, I was born and raised in New York City. And I was born in the Bronx, the baddest borough there is, for those of you from New York. And I never really went to Manhattan. We just didn't. And, as a kid, of course, later in life I did. I ended up working on Wall Street. But at the time, you really have no concept of an industry. You have no concept of a corporate entity. You have no concept of professions and life other than what's at school. And we also find that in the lower socioeconomic schools that, and even in the magnet schools, the public magnet schools, when we turn the tables on the girls immediately, and this will give you a really good insight, we turn the tables on the girls immediately when they become a financial advisor for Janella. And they keep meeting Janella in these 3 different sets of curriculum. In the first set, they have to tell us what profession Janella is. We don't tell them what it is. We just tell her what she makes a year. And then they have to read her paycheck and so forth and so on. And then we're always following the stock market, of course. But so it's amazing to me that some of the brightest kids in the magnet schools, if everybody knows what a magnet school is in a public school district, it's the schools that have some of the brightest kids in that city. What do you think the number 1 and number 2 professions are for those students that they said Janella was? Leslie, if you could take a guess.
Are they saying like doctor, lawyer?
It is teacher
Okay.
and nurse. Very, very stereotypical professions. Again, not that there's anything wrong with either. I have many nurses in my family and educators.
Yeah.
I sleep with one, my husband. So it was astounding to me how bright these are really good, bright kids. They still were, I don't want to say, they still only had the confines of that high school or maybe a parent working as maybe a nurse or something. And I said, well, where is my, engineer? Where is my CEO? Where is my data person? Never even dawned on them. So that's why it's so critical for them to get outside of the high school. These field trips are phenomenal for these kids. I would say that's the first thing they like. The second thing they like is actually the financial projects. Each set of curriculum has a financial project involved. And so we're there, generally speaking now, again, it's pre and post-COVID. Pre-COVID, we're there just to guide them in the mathematical computations and in also finding out some of the data. Post-COVID, we have to guide them a little more because within what's called a meeting room, because we break off for meeting rooms, smaller meeting rooms, the kids don't know each other quite well enough. And of course, as teenage girls, they're shy. So we have to pull them along a little more. But nonetheless, the work is getting done. But I would say there's a real sense of discovery when the girls read a paycheck for the first time ever. They're absolutely astounded by income taxes. Aren't we all? And they're like, what's that? Because there's so much money coming out of them, federal, state, and if you're in New York City, city tax. So that's really a real big discovery on their parts. They're blown away by income taxes. They really have no concept of income taxes. And then as far as the mentorship component, it's probably one of the most impactful pieces of the program because they do have this 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio of getting their resumes up if they're over 16 onto LinkedIn, joining our groups there. On LinkedIn, we have a student and alumni group in there. And then they are actually cross-pollinating. We have found out that they're cross-pollinating. We have about 350 girls in there currently. And so we're finding out that they're getting jobs by talking to each other, which is kind of fun. Also, some of them have reached out to me and say, for instance, one of them is that when I was in the trenches and for the first 3 years teaching this program, I'm delighted to say that we had 6 girls in one of our classes and 4 of them are in finance. So that's fantastic. One of them had a job interview at NASDAQ in Washington, D.C. So she just happened to reach out to me and she was not my mentee, but she remembered me and she reached out to me and I said, what are you doing these days? And said, I'm interviewing at NASDAQ. I said, well, tell them, that you did Rock the Street Wall Street, because we did 3 field trips to NASDAQ. And if anything, that'll strike up the interest, and that'll be more of a reason why they see that you're serious about coming into finance and so forth and so on. So, and she got the job. I'm not saying that's the reason she got the job, but it was certainly a nice icebreaker for her. And they know that we're there. And as you know, Leslie, part of the dilemma that our industry has is that women feel sometimes that they don't belong because they see the bro culture and so forth and so on. So we have to create our own groups to make them feel like they belong. Mm-hmm. So we have them in high school. We are looking at some programs that take the girls at college and working with them, and then on beyond. And we're creating that affinity beyond college as well. That was a long.
No, I mean, really helpful to hear how the girls are engaging and what elements of each part of the curriculum are really exciting and new for them. That's great to hear. I was also wondering, as Rock the Street interacts with institutions, are you seeing any dialogue change regarding the lack of women in finance? Like how, if at all, is that dialogue changing?
I don't know, and I'm happy to go over those reasons, which are fascinating in itself. But that's the silent killer that no one is talking about. No one. And again, that's where I wanted to go into public policy. There is nothing on public policy on this. And so they are beginning to understand. It's just like programming. You have to get the girls early. I chose high school because it's a pivotal age as to careers. It's a pivotal age as to, well, can we get them back? Let them understand, first of all, that finance isn't anything more than first-year algebra. We certainly have our quants and algos, but for the most part, I'm going to say 99% of us only have to know first-year algebra at most to do finance. And then and so if they can do that, and there is a sigh of relief in the room when we mention that, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can handle that. And I'm like, well, then you can have a brilliant career. Not only can you have a brilliant career, you can manage your own, not manage your own finances, but certainly get a handle on your own finances. And so they begin to feel empowered in that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's basically the power of what we're bringing to these girls.
Yeah, and it sounds like through more institutions leaning into programs like this, the awareness is raising, which is really the first step to making a change. So it feels like a step in the right direction. Yeah.
I do think, as I said, I've been seeing more in print about the we have to get them at the younger age. I will say we have more and more sponsors each year. I believe we have over 10 new sponsors this year. So we're getting more and more. So again, we're getting more traction on this. I mean, when I first started, everyone would tell me more, it's too long of a tail, quote unquote, because we recruit them to college. I'm like, you'll never get a broader range of women applying if you don't go down to the high school level. You will never, ever fill the pipeline because they've opted out. The research shows that they've already opted out of economics, finance, math, all of it. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. We don't have to say how old I am, but many, many years ago in college, I was the only girl in my financial math class. There were 35 men and me. And I'd gone to an all-girls high school. So imagine that picture. So they get to campus. And then fast forward, on my staff is Ashley Leftwich. Ashley, some of you who may be listening may know her. Ashley is on our donor development team, and she's a generation younger than me. She was on a much larger campus than I was, college campus. She was on the University of Georgia, which has 40,000 students. So there she is in her math class. She was the only female among 40 men in her class, a whole generation later. And so this is still happening, and no one is talking about it. So we have to bring this up more and more often. And then I'll have people say to me, well, Maura, finance, a profession in finance doesn't always have to be, quote, math oriented. There's relationships and so forth and so on. And I was like, you're absolutely right. However, it is certainly the gateway. And if we keep denying that it's not the gateway, then we're doing a disservice to the girls and to ourselves. You must know the basics in order to be comfortable, in order to give your clients some guidance, whether it's a retail individual or it's an institutional client. So, please don't say that, finance is not that math oriented, because it is. I mean, again, it's a gateway to the career itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I know at Vanguard, right, there's a lot of dialogue around the importance of diversity. And I think, our companies there and a lot of other institutions are there and understanding the importance and the benefits that come with diversity. And kind of working backwards from there, more and more institutions are trying to increase diversity in their talent pools when they post certain roles. And I think, to your point, if you continue to trace it back in time all the way through, back through the pipeline of when the issue really starts, it is at those earlier levels, and it's getting them. I was actually shocked to hear age 7. 7 to 9 is when it really begins. That is early. So it's great that there's organizations like yours they're looking to address and really pinpoint that issue early enough in the pipeline. I have a few more prepared questions, but I would love for the audience members to chat anything on their mind, and I can incorporate those in the last 15 minutes or so of our discussion. So while I'm allowing you all to brainstorm and chat questions, one other thing on my mind is when you were talking about the curriculum in general and how teachers feel unprepared to teach financial and investment literacy. I was curious, has there been any thought in your organization or exploration to go beyond just the local high schools and get more involved at the state level to talk about changing the curriculum and a partnership there to move the dial on what's expected of all high schools?
It's difficult. The answer is yes. Difficult because school is really city run, not state run. So no matter what the state says, it's going to be a city issue. Now, again, I don't know all the legislation and all of that. I do have, here's an example. The state of Tennessee does require seniors to have a semester of financial literacy. The challenge is who's teaching it. As I mentioned, I've audited classes here in and around Nashville, and the further you go out in the rural areas, the worse it gets as to who's teaching it. I mean, in the case I audited, there were 15 errors in the presentation. And so even if they legislate it, it's a function of who's carrying it out. And so it's a real challenge. We met with Senator Lamar Alexander's people, who was the Secretary of Education under another administration. He's now one of the Tennessee senators. And they said to us, will you teach the teachers? And, if you do, we can find funding for you. And we were like, we're just not sure that approach has worked. Now the Treasury Department is trying to do that. They have an operation underway. And what they do is they drop ship in the teacher to learn financial investment and investment concepts for 1 week. And then they go back to school and they really don't understand it. And again, this whole math anxiety that girls have in the United States, we're not going to overcome it if that's the way they're going to do it. Girls in the United States have what's called a much higher negative affective reaction to math. It's a totally cultural, and I'm happy to go into that, take a deep dive with you on that and why. I don't think that for the purpose of time right now that we can, but quite frankly, I wasn't interested. I just said, look, you've tried that model for over 40 years. It hasn't worked. The financial literacy rates in the United States are awful. The teachers who are teaching it don't want to teach it. So, you find me a set of teachers that really want to teach this and will teach only this, then talk to me. But don't tell me about the football coach you're going to put in, or the drama teacher, or the substitute teacher who's going to teach it, who really doesn't know what they're talking about. And I mean that, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. But they're put into an impossible situation, and I was told, again, when I was doing my thesis, I did 24 field interviews of academicians throughout all the different high schools here in Nashville, public, private, magnet, charter, you name it, I've been in there. And they said, Maura, if you do this, make it relevant, make it relevant, make it relevant. Because here's what happens. The kid gets a book, and I've looked at the books, and they're boring. They're formulaic. There's no real live information happening. We always make our information of the minute, quite frankly. I'm a bit of a news hound, so I made sure that the curriculum is newsy. And we show the relative of, for instance, when I was first launching this, if you may remember, we had protests in Greece. And you would see the traders on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange watching the protests in Greece and going, and the market would drop, and then you would see, when Steve Jobs died, what happened to the stock? It went way down, and things like that. And in terms of the relativity, we watched the Facebook IPO go live and what happened there, why did that happen? We're talking now about COVID. The stocks that the girls are following this year include Clorox, Netflix, Amazon, Shopify, Target, and Amazon, if I didn't already mention that. The third set of books, by the way, that we have, the curriculum, it's actually stock analysis. We don't call it that. We call it a case study because they know those things, with the exception of Shopify. But they know all the other stuff, so they're learning about Shopify.
Brand names, yeah. Oh, that's great. And we do have some questions coming in through the audience. Really great questions. I want to make sure we get to them. One is to get a little bit more specifics on sponsorship. So can you talk a little bit more about the cost expectation of the institution and expectation of volunteers?
Sure. So the requested donation for the year-long program is $25,000 per year. And again, that's the full year. And the expectation is depending upon who is sponsoring. So for instance, let's take JP Morgan. So JP Morgan, who sponsors a school in Manhattan, they provide us with a $25,000 annual sponsorship for that one school. Now we're talking to them about other cities, including Chicago, San Francisco, Atlanta. But within 24 hours, when they put out notice about Rock the Street and volunteer opportunities, over 34 of them responded. I mean, that was just within 24 hours. So you can see that resonates with them. And the corporations or the firms like these programs for many reasons, which include, number one, we're a year long. So they don't have to keep looking and hunting for new initiatives for their ERG groups or their DNI initiatives, because we're there all the time. And we are year after year after year. So we're not a one and done. Chicago women in particular approached me and said, look, we're tired of this one and done. We're a company spending $40,000 on one night. They roll out the red carpets to our clients, tell them how wonderful a job they're doing on DNI. And then they roll up their carpets and then they're gone for a year and nothing's happened. So they said, we're fed up. So they were the ones who pushed for the sponsorship in Chicago. And it's meaningful. I mean, these women who are participating obviously are going into the local schools. It means something. They can see the difference in the kids. They can also see that the pipeline is building. We hope to expand a lot more, by the way, I don't know if that's me. That was me. I don't know how to shut that down. Sorry. Can you hear that?
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It's not a time lapse.
On our laptops, everything pops up. Yeah.
So we hope to have, you had asked earlier, we hope to have many more chapters in Chicago. We're just beginning to get traction there. We have 7 schools in Manhattan, by the way, 6 this year. We already have a commitment next year for a 7th school. And in Chicago, we have 2 schools. And we know that the industry is well there. And by the way, we're all over the United States. I think people will be quite surprised at our footprint. We're all over the United States, and people find that surprising. But if you live in Tennessee, you're not surprised. But to answer his question or her questions, so it's the commitment is the financial commitment and also the employee commitment. But again, keep in mind, this is a thing that resonates with, this is a program that resonates with their women. They're also getting people who volunteer for the first time ever in their lives because financial types are not known to volunteer. Believe it or not, they have a bad rap. I said, well, we just got to tap into them. And they want to give back what's called skills-based volunteerism. And so we offer that instead of the soup kitchen or coach, not that there's anything wrong with that. but millennials particularly want to give back in a skills-based format, so we offer that. Now, there are some entities, RIAs in particular, who have small numbers of females, and they'll say, like, we don't have enough females. I'm like, don't worry about it. You know, we will work with the local CFA society, or we will work with the CFP board, or we will work with our contacts in those cities. As I mentioned, we have interest in 67 cities coming in, and we'll help all together the volunteers. And it's a nice way for them to cross-pollinate, to get to know each other. So it's really quite good. And as we all know, most of the men get together on the golf course or at the bar. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I do both of those things. But women seem to want to be more mission driven. And so this is a great way for them to socialize, and a great way to bond organically. And so it's a great way. I've heard people tell me, you know, I saw a woman on the elevator every morning, never really said hello to her. And now she's part of this group. And now I'm like, oh, it's you. Because she's the only other woman on the other floor. And she's like, oh, this is great. We're giving an opportunity here. You know, and they start to have lunch together. They start to carpool in the suburbs together to the schools. It's really very, very bonding for them.
That's great. So it sounds like the ask is the $25,000 per year, the commitment of volunteers from the institution, and then potential to partner with other local organizations like a society for other volunteers to actually teach the financial and investment literacy and be the mentors for these girls. Yep. Okay, that's great. And I'll also comment, I actually got the opportunity to sit in on BlackRock's field trip. It was about a year ago, and it was so much fun. I think you're spot on with the social networking aspect of it for the BlackRock employees, but it was so much fun. The BlackRock professionals actually acted like candidates for jobs, and they pitched their resume to the high school students who were supposed to be acting as the interviewers. It was just so much fun to watch, and it seemed like, you know, everyone was having fun from a professional standpoint and from the student standpoint. So yeah, really, really great, great field trip ideas too that come in. We'll end with one last question, and this is more broader. So sounds like the question's getting at, okay, so you're focused on the finance industry, but is there an initiative within your organization to create better equity for girls wanting to be in other sectors and other professions?
Sure. I mean, we're agnostic as far as where the girls end up. The point is for them to get a seat at the table. And in order to get a seat at the table, any table in business, you have to know the numbers. They don't have to be accountants, but they have to know the numbers. And so we're totally agnostic as far as where these girls end up. They can be in municipal finance, federal, you know, treasury, you know, corporate finance, wherever they want to go, accounting, wherever they want to go. But the point is to expose them to this, because they're not exposed whatsoever. And so, and we make sure that the girls know that. Like I'm stressing the finance industry because it's where I come from. You know, it's my background. But the curriculum we go over all the different aspects, you know, venture capital. As I mentioned earlier, we're speaking to Silicon Valley a lot these days. And so, you know, they have their comments about Wall Street and so forth, and they don't like, you know, they were like, well, we're not Wall Street types. And I'm like, well, don't worry about it. That's just shorthand for the rest of the country, meaning investments. And please understand that it's meant to be shorthand for investments. Because again, the research shows no one is speaking to these girls about investments. Mom isn't, dad isn't. Dad will speak to his son about it, but will not speak to his daughter about it. So I had to get the headset of investments into what we're doing. But we're agnostic as far as where the girls end up, as long as they get a seat at the table, so that they can be decision makers in the corporate world and in their own entrepreneurial endeavors. We get a lot of entrepreneurs in our classes. So, you know, they can go wherever they choose, and we will provide them with as much access as we possibly can.
That's great. All right, so we're close to being up on the hour, so I just wanted to spend the last couple minutes thanking the audience for your participation and engagement, especially thanking Mara for all of your insights, information about Rock the Street. And is it safe to say if anyone wants to learn more or has any follow-up questions, obviously Rock the Street Wall Street is a great resource, but you all can certainly reach out to myself or any members of the Women's Advisory Committee putting on the diversity event, and we can kind of connect you with the right people to get you to Mara. And with that, I was going to jump to a plug for our next D&I event, but Mara, I wanted to give you the opportunity to say any closing remarks.
Well, first of all, thank you again, Leslie, for offering us the opportunity to meet with or at least Zoom with the Philadelphia CFA Society. And then with regard to getting in contact with us, you can just go to our website and go on the landing page and scroll to the bottom. It'll say you can be part of the solution. Let's talk, and just hit let's talk. And then that message will come to our team, and then we will get in touch with you. Obviously, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. We have a couple of good upcoming events. One includes the UN Women. We'll be participating with them in November, and we have some other events coming up as well. So, and if any of you want to hear about our program, please feel free to speak to your BlackRock colleagues in Philadelphia, or the CFA Society of New York City, those two that were on the tape, or Blair Duquesne, who's down in New Orleans, or the Denver Society, which, as I mentioned earlier, is working with our school in Denver, Colorado this year. And thank you again, Leslie.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Well, I know I will certainly be following you and your organization. So quick plug for our next D&I event. The next session is going to be on Thursday, October 15th at noon again, 12 to 1, called Say This, Not That. And it will feature Deloitte leading us through an interactive session on the importance of language. So thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and we hope to see you again next week.